I've always been the responsible one in the family. My name is Ashley, I'm 37, and I work as a senior marketing director at a tech company. It's a good job with good pay, but I worked damn hard to get here. Unlike my younger siblings, who seem to float through life expecting handouts. When my parents called asking me to come over for a family dinner, I didn't think much of it. They bought their house about 10 years ago with a mortgage they're still paying off. It's a nice place in the suburbs, nothing fancy, but comfortable. I live in my own apartment downtown. It's small but it's mine, and I've been saving for years to buy an actual house someday. I pulled into my parents' driveway behind my brother Mark's beat-up Honda. My sister Jen's Mazda was there too. Great. The whole gang was assembled. I grabbed the bottle of wine I'd brought and headed inside. "Ashley, you made it," Mom greeted me with a hug that felt a little too tight. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. "Everything okay, Mom?" I asked, handing her the wine. "Oh, we'll talk at dinner. Your father's in the living room with your brother and sister." I found Dad sitting in his recliner looking like he'd aged 10 years since I last saw him. Mark and Jen were on the couch, both absorbed in their phones. "Hey, Dad," I leaned down to kiss his cheek, "how's it going?" "Been better," he said with a weak smile, "but we'll get to that." "What's wrong? Are you sick?" A ball of worry formed in my stomach. No, nothing like that. We'll discuss it over dinner." I turned to my siblings. "Hey guys." Mark glanced up from his phone. "Hey sis." At 28, my brother still acted like a teenager. He worked sporadically as a bartender but spent most of his time partying and dating a series of interchangeable girlfriends. Jen, 30, gave me a quick smile before returning to her Instagram scrolling. "Nice outfit, Target?" She always had a way of making compliments sound like insults. She worked at a salon but was constantly taking courses and switching career paths, never settling on anything. Mom called us to the dining room. We all took our usual seats, Mom and Dad at the ends, me on one side, Mark and Jen on the other. Mom had made pot roast, my favorite, which immediately made me suspicious. Something was definitely up. We made small talk while serving the food. I noticed my parents exchanging glances. Finally, after we'd all started eating, Dad cleared his throat. "Kids, your mother and I need to talk to you about something." His voice was serious. Mom reached for his hand. "We're having some financial difficulties." "What kind of difficulties?" I asked, putting down my fork. Dad sighed. "I lost my job last month, budget cuts, and your mother. The doctor says I need to cut back my hours at the school," Mom added. She'd been an elementary school teacher for 30 years. "My blood pressure's been too high, and standing all day is getting harder." "So what does this mean?" Mark asked, still chewing. "It means we're having trouble making our mortgage payments," Dad said. "And the utilities, everything, really." The table fell silent. Then, slowly, everyone's eyes turned to me. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized what was happening. "We hate to ask," Mom began, her eyes welling up with tears, "but we're family." "I've been helping already," I said cautiously. "I've been giving you guys money for groceries. I paid for the new refrigerator last year, helped with the bathroom renovation. I looked at my siblings, and I've helped you both with rent when you needed it." Mark and Jen exchanged a glance. "Yeah, but Ash," Jen said, leaning forward, "you make way more than any of us. And these are our parents we're talking about." "You've got that big promotion," Mark added. "It's not like you need all that money." I sat there stunned. "So you're saying I should take on their mortgage payments? While you two do what exactly?" Dad looked down at his plate. "We're not asking forever, honey. Just until I can find another job." "We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate," Mom added. I looked around the table at their expectant faces. My siblings, who I'd already bailed out countless times. My parents, who I loved despite everything. I knew I should stand my ground, but the words that came out of my mouth were, "Okay. I'll help." The relief on their faces was immediate. The tension in the room dissolved as if I'd waved a magic wand. Mom's eyes lit up, and Dad sat straighter in his chair. "I knew we could count on you, Ashley," Mom said, squeezing my hand across the table. "You've always been our rock." The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that. Dad told jokes, Jen talked about a celebrity who'd come into her salon, and Mark bragged about some girl he was seeing. But I barely heard them. I was mentally recalculating my budget, watching my dream of owning a home slip further away. As I drove back to my apartment that night, I set up the recurring mortgage payment in my banking app. Family comes first, I told myself. Even when they take you for granted. The weeks following that fateful dinner changed everything. What started as just the mortgage payment quickly snowballed into an avalanche of requests. My phone became a never-ending stream of financial emergencies from my family. Mom needed money for groceries. Dad's car needed repairs. The water heater broke. The property taxes were due. Each time, I transferred the money without argument. I told myself it was temporary, that things would get better once Dad found a new job. But as weeks turned into months, there was always a new crisis, a new expense. One Tuesday morning in early spring, my phone buzzed with a text from Jen, "Need $2,000 for cosmetology certification. Job requires it, can you help?" I stared at the screen, doing quick mental math. I'd already sent my parents $1,200 for the mortgage this month, plus another $450 for utilities. I'd given Mark $800 last week to fix his car's transmission. My savings account was dwindling faster than I could replenish it. I sighed and replied, "I'll transfer it today." Her response was immediate, "You're the best, I'll pay you back someday." We both knew she wouldn't. I opened my banking app and made the transfer, then pulled up my budget spreadsheet. The numbers were bleak. At this rate, my dream of buying a house would remain just that, a dream. The money I'd been saving for years was now serving as my family's personal emergency fund. But family comes first, I reminded myself. Even if they don't appreciate it. My birthday arrived in late April, 37. I hadn't planned anything special, just a quiet evening at home with takeout and wine. I'd invited my family over, not expecting much, but hoping for at least a little celebration. Mom and Dad arrived empty-handed. "Sorry honey, no gift this year," Mom said as she kissed my cheek, "you know how things are. We didn't want to give you something cheap." I swallowed my disappointment, "No problem, I'm just glad you're here." Dad patted my shoulder and headed straight for my fridge to grab a beer. My doorbell rang again 20 minutes later. It was Mark with a woman I'd never seen before. "Happy birthday, sis," he said, handing me a small package wrapped in newspaper. "This is Tiffany." The woman gave me a quick wave, "Nice place." I unwrapped Mark's gift, a keychain with a plastic cupcake dangling from it. The price tag was still attached, $4.99. "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. "Do you have any food?" Mark asked, already heading toward my kitchen. "We're starving." I watched as he filled 2 plates with the pasta I'd ordered, then packed up a third container with leftovers. "We've gotta run," he announced after they'd eaten. "Tiffany's friend is having a thing. Can we take this?" He held up the container of food. Before I could answer, they were heading out the door. "Thanks for the food." Later, and they were gone. My phone pinged with a text from Jen, "So sorry, can't make it tonight. Have a date, happy birthday." I poured myself another glass of wine and sat down with my parents, who spent the next hour complaining about their financial struggles. "The insurance went up again," Dad sighed. "And we need a new washer," Mom added, "ours is making that terrible noise again." I nodded, letting their hints wash over me without response. I'd given enough this month. When they finally left, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by empty takeout containers and dirty wine glasses. Some birthday. 2 more months dragged by. My bank account continued to shrink while my resentment grew. Then came the announcement: Mom and Dad were planning their 40th wedding anniversary celebration and wanted to do something special. They needed $5,000 for a venue and catering. I wanted to say no. I should have said no. But when Mom called with that pleading tone in her voice, talking about how they'd never had a proper celebration for any of their anniversaries, I caved. The day of the anniversary party arrived. The venue was beautiful, an event space downtown with elegant decorations and a catered buffet. I recognized faces from my childhood, aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents' old neighbors and friends. Everyone was dressed in their finest, champagne glasses clinking as they celebrated my parents' 40 years together. I mingled with relatives I hadn't seen in years, answering the usual questions about my job and love life. No boyfriend. Yes, still at the same company. No kids yet. The conversation always ended with a pitying smile and a "well, there's still time." When the time came for speeches, everyone gathered around my parents. My father's sister gave a touching tribute to their enduring love. Old friends shared funny stories from their early years together. Then it was time for the children to speak. Mark went first, giving a rambling speech about what great parents they'd been, how they always supported his dreams. Jen followed, tearing up as she talked about their unconditional love and sacrifice. Then it was my turn. I kept it brief, congratulating them on 40 years and wishing them many more. They smiled politely and thanked me before turning their attention back to my siblings. During their response speech, my parents gushed about how proud they were of their children. They spoke at length about Mark's entrepreneurial spirit and Jen's artistic talent. I got a single mention, and Ashley, always so responsible. I plastered on a smile, ignoring the sting. I'd paid for this entire celebration, and I was barely an afterthought. Just as dessert was being served, my phone rang. It was my boss. I excused myself and stepped outside to take the call. There was an issue with a client presentation that needed immediate attention. After the call, I headed back inside but paused in the hallway outside the main room to check my appearance in a mirror. That's when I heard them, my mother's voice and my Aunt Linda's, coming from around the corner. "I noticed you didn't say much about Ashley in your speech," Aunt Linda said. I froze, my hand still on my compact mirror. Mom laughed softly. "Well, between us, Ashley's just a purse for us now. She always gives money whenever we ask." The words hit me like a physical blow. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding. "If she wasn't helping with the mortgage and everything else," Mom continued, "we probably wouldn't even keep in touch. She's always been difficult, not like Mark and Jen." "It must be hard," Aunt Linda said sympathetically, "having to pretend you care about a child you don't love." I stood frozen in the hallway, my mother's words echoing in my head. Ashley's just a purse for us now. My own mother had just admitted she didn't love me, that she only kept in touch because of my money. Everything I believed about my family was crumbling around me. "Have you and Robert updated your will lately?" Aunt Linda asked, changing the subject. "Done it last year," Mom replied casually. "The house and everything else will be split between Mark and Jen, Ashley's not included." I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle a gasp. Not only did they see me as an ATM, but they'd also deliberately cut me out of their will, after I'd been paying their mortgage. The house I was helping them keep would never be partly mine. I heard them moving, heading back to the party. I slipped into the ladies' room to avoid them, locking myself in a stall until I could breathe normally again. My hands shook as I checked my reflection in the mirror. Somehow, I looked the same. How could I look the same when everything had changed? I returned to the party, moving like a ghost through the crowd. No one noticed when I collected my purse and jacket. No one saw me slip out the door. I drove home in a daze, my mind replaying my mother's words on a loop. At home, I poured myself a large glass of wine and opened my banking app. With clinical detachment, I scrolled through months of transactions, adding up everything I'd given my family. The mortgage payments, the utilities, the loans to my siblings that were never repaid, the anniversary party. It was staggering, nearly $30,000 in the past few months alone. And for what? To buy the affection of people who didn't even like me? With a decisive tap, I canceled the scheduled mortgage payment. Then I went to bed, feeling oddly calm. For the first time in months, I slept deeply, without waking to check my phone for family emergencies. The next week passed in strange silence. No calls from my parents. No texts from my siblings begging for money. They hadn't even noticed I'd left the party early. They didn't care enough to check if I was okay. It was exactly 7 days after the anniversary when my phone finally rang, my mother's name flashing on the screen. Ashley, her voice was tight with panic, the bank just called us. They said the mortgage payment didn't go through. Did you forget to send it? No hello, no how are you, just straight to the money. I didn't forget, I said calmly, I canceled it. Silence on the line. Then, what do you mean, you canceled it? Why would you do that? I'm not paying your mortgage anymore, Mom. I'm not giving any of you money ever again. Have you lost your mind? Her voice rose. What's gotten into you? I heard you at the party, I said, my voice steady despite the anger burning in my chest. I heard what you said to Aunt Linda. That I'm just a purse to you. That you don't even love me. You misunderstood, she stammered, I didn't mean. And I heard about the will, I continued. How you're leaving everything to Mark and Jen. Nothing to me, even though I'm the one paying to keep your house. You're overreacting, she said, her tone shifting from panic to condescension. Family helps family, that's what we do. No, that's what I do. Mark and Jen don't help, you and Dad don't help. I'm the only one giving, and I'm done. I hung up and immediately turned off my phone. When I turned it back on hours later, there were dozens of missed calls and messages. Mom, Dad, Mark, Jen, all suddenly very interested in talking to me. I skimmed the texts. They all said essentially the same thing, I was being selfish. I was overreacting. I had money to spare, so why wouldn't I help? They were struggling while I lived comfortably. I owed them. I blocked their numbers. For 3 blessed days, I had peace. Then on Saturday morning, a pounding on my apartment door jolted me awake. I checked through the peephole and saw them all standing there, Mom, Dad, Mark, and Jen. Ashley, we know you're in there, Dad called through the door. Open up, we need to talk. I have nothing to say to any of you, I replied, standing firmly on the other side of the locked door, please leave. We had to borrow money to make this month's payment, Mom cried, her voice breaking. We could lose the house. My health isn't good, Dad added, do you want us to be homeless? Why don't Mark and Jen help? I asked. They're getting the house in your will, after all. How can you be so selfish? Jen shouted. You're just a bitter old maid with nowhere to spend your money anyway. Her words stung, but they also confirmed everything I already knew. I was nothing to them but a checkbook. Leave now, or I'm calling the police, I said firmly. If you don't leave in the next 60 seconds, I'm dialing 911. I heard muttered curses, then footsteps retreating. From my window, I watched them get into Dad's car and drive away. I thought that would be the end of it, but they weren't done yet. The calls started coming from other relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles, all with the same message, family is above all. You should help your parents. How could you be so cruel? I stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I blocked emails. I set all my social media to private. Slowly, the siege began to lift. Through mutual friends, I heard updates. Mark and Jen had moved back to our parents' house to help with the mortgage. They were all struggling to adjust to their new financial reality. No more expensive boutiques for Jen. No more partying for Mark. They had to rely on themselves now, not on me. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my savings. My dream of owning a home was back on track. Without the constant drain of my family's demands, I was amazed at how quickly my account grew. I started looking at real estate listings again, even scheduled a few viewings. One evening, while browsing houses online, I got a text from an unknown number. It's Mom, please call me. We need to talk, we miss you. I blocked the number without replying and returned to scrolling through photos of houses that might someday be mine. Houses where I'd never have to open the door to people who saw me as nothing but a means to an end. 3 months passed without contact from my family. I settled into a peaceful routine, focusing on my career and myself for the first time in years. I started therapy, trying to understand why I'd allowed my family to use me for so long. My therapist helped me see that I'd been buying their love with money, hoping that if I gave them enough, they'd finally value me the way they valued Mark and Jen. But their love had never been for sale, because they'd never intended to sell it to me. By month 4, I'd made a big decision. I put my apartment on the market and it sold quickly for a good price. Between the sale proceeds and my revitalized savings, I had enough to make a serious offer on a nice house in a good neighborhood. It had a cozy backyard with mature trees and space for the garden I'd always wanted. Not the mansion of my dreams, but something even better, a real home that would be entirely mine, bought with money I'd earned and saved without sacrificing my dignity. The morning after my offer was accepted, my phone rang with yet another unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Ashley," it was my father's voice, softer than I'd heard it in years. "Please don't hang up." "What do you want, Dad?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "We're having a really hard time," he said. "Your mother and I, the bank is threatening foreclosure. Mark and Jen are trying, but they can't cover it all." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I didn't want them to suffer, but I can't help anymore. "We made a mistake," he admitted. "Your mother and I have been talking. We've changed our will. The house will be split 3 ways now. Equal shares for all our children." And there it was, not an apology, but a bribe. They weren't sorry for how they'd treated me. They were offering me a share of a house that might be foreclosed on anyway, in exchange for my continued financial support. "That's not why I stopped helping, Dad," I said quietly. "It was never about the will. It was about being taken for granted. It was about Mom saying she doesn't even love me, that I'm just a wallet to all of you." "She was upset that day," he protested weakly. "She didn't mean it." "She sounded pretty clear to me," I replied. "And none of you have apologized. You're only calling because you need money again." The silence confirmed my suspicion. "I have to go, Dad. I just bought a house, my house. I hope things work out for you all." I hung up and blocked the number. The attempts to contact me continued, growing more desperate as their financial situation worsened. They sent messages through coworkers, neighbors, even had someone slip a note under my door. Each time, the focus was on what they needed, what I could give them, never on how they'd hurt me or how they could make amends. Through mutual friends, I learned they'd had to take out a second mortgage to avoid foreclosure. Mark had finally gotten a full-time job at a warehouse. Jen had given up on cosmetology and was working as a receptionist. My parents had sold their second car and were cutting expenses wherever they could. I felt a complicated mix of emotions, sadness that they were struggling, satisfaction that they were finally facing reality, guilt that I wasn't helping, relief that I'd broken free from their manipulation. But mostly, I felt proud of myself for standing my ground. 6 months after cutting ties, I moved into my new house. It wasn't enormous, but it was in a nice neighborhood with good sidewalks and friendly neighbors. Every square inch was mine, paid for with money I'd earned and saved without sacrificing my self-respect. I painted the walls my favorite colors, bought furniture I loved, and planted flowers in my cozy backyard, creating the sanctuary I'd always dreamed of having. As I was unpacking in my new home, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a delivery person with a large envelope. Inside was a formal invitation to my cousin Emma's wedding, along with a handwritten note. "I know things are difficult with the family right now, but I'd love to have you there. No pressure." I'd always been close to Emma. She was one of the few relatives who hadn't taken sides in the family drama. I called her that evening. "Thanks for the invitation," I said. "I'm not sure if I should come." "Will my parents be there?" "Of course they will," she said honestly. "But this is my day, and I want you there. I can seat you far away from them." Will they try to corner me? I can't handle another ambush. I've made it clear to everyone, no family drama at my wedding. If anyone tries anything, my fiancé's brothers will escort them out. They're both former football players, she added with a laugh. I considered it, maybe it was time to reclaim my place in the extended family, on my terms. I'll be there, I decided. The wedding was beautiful. True to her word, Emma seated me at a table with old school friends, far from my immediate family. I caught glimpses of them throughout the evening, Mom and Dad looking older and more subdued, Mark in a suit that seemed a size too large, Jen without her usual designer accessories. During the reception, I stepped outside for some air and found myself face to face with my mother. Ashley, she said, clearly surprised, you look well. Thanks, I replied, you too. An awkward silence stretched between us. I heard you bought a house, she finally said. Yes, I sold my apartment and bought a nice place with a backyard. It's perfect for me. She nodded, looking down at her hands, we're doing better now. Mark got promoted. Jen's going back to school, something practical this time. I'm glad, I said, and meant it. We miss you, she said, her voice small. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the manipulative mother who'd called me a purse, but an aging woman who'd made terrible choices and was living with the consequences. I miss who I thought you all were, I admitted, but I don't miss being used. She flinched but didn't argue. As I turned to go back inside, she called after me, will you ever forgive us? I paused, considering her question. Maybe someday, I said, but not today. Walking back to the reception, I felt lighter somehow. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to buy their love. I was building my own life, on my own terms. And that was something worth celebrating.